Yep, the idea of today is there we go. So the meeting is recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, please turn off your camera. Basically, today we go through the go-to-market strategies for DTx. We have an expert here, which is Pablo Prieto, which is a person who worked for many years in pharmaceutical companies, then moved into startups, and he built his own startup actually, and then works also for Mika, which is a DTx in Germany, and I think he will explain a bit more his experience on. And I think for moderating, it's Jambi. So actually a student of our first the excellence program, and now she's collaborating with us. Very happy with her.
You couldn't get rid of me.
So today, we have a small part where Pablo will go through the some strategies, and then we have an open stage for questions. So feel free to prepare your questions for later on. And Jambi, I'll let you go ahead. I don't want to steal the stage, so go ahead. Thank you.
No, thank you, Luca. So Pablo is going to be starting off with a really brilliant presentation and talking you through sort of go-to-market strategies from his perspective. If you have questions, even through as the presentation is sort of happening, just pop it in the chat, and then if you're happy enough to say it out loud when he's finished, please feel free. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to read it as well. But so I'm going to hand over to Pablo now.
Yeah, thank you, Jambi, Armando, and Luca for the invitation. As Jambi just said, this is meant to be a super interactive session. I just want to open the conversation with a few of my own thoughts about going into market into the US and Europe. So I'm gonna share a few slides. As Jambi said, you can add your comments in the chat at any point, and then afterwards we'll have a little bit of a conversation. And I think the idea is that all of you can ask questions as you see fit, and then jointly we'll try to get through those. All right, so let's see if I can get my presentation up here on stage. And you should be able to see it right now. Let me know if you don't.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Because this is the Digital Therapeutics Club, I thought I would start with something that is sometimes not so obvious, and that's the definition of what is a DTx. And I'm not going to be using my own definition. I'm going to be using a consensus definition from the Digital Therapeutics Alliance. There is an organization that tries to foster digital therapeutics across the globe, and the Alliance has the definition that you have on screen. It is a little bit of a mouthful, but if you think about digital therapeutics, there is already a lot of information in those two words. The first word, as in digital, means that we're basically talking about software programs, and the second one, therapeutic, means that these are therapeutic interventions. And as such, as a therapeutic intervention, the intention really is what sets it apart from patient companion programs or wellness programs. So the intention of these software programs is to prevent, manage, or treat a medical disorder, condition, or disease. Yeah, and in this definition, on top of that, it requires that to be a digital therapeutic or a prescription digital therapeutic. You must have some sort of evidence backing your intervention, ideally optimizing patient care. So in other words, producing health outcomes. Yeah, I thought I would get this out of the door because there seems to be sometimes a little bit of flexibility in talking about digital health and so on and so forth. So I'm going to be talking specifically about DTx, or as they call them in the US, prescription digital therapeutics, PDTs. Okay, so jumping straight into the first example that I want to talk about in the US as go-to-market example is Akili Interactive. This is a company that is now public in the US. You probably know it. If not, their first product is Endeavor RX. It's a doctor-prescribed video game treatment for kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And as such, the key stakeholders being DTx in the US and being doctor prescribed, obviously it's the consumer or patient, and I'm using consumer very purposely in this example, obviously the healthcare providers, and finally the payers. And when Akili explained their go-to-market strategy, they have very specific goals for these three populations as they enter the market in the US. With the consumers, the first thing that they did is they wanted to get the experience right. And that is not very intuitive. People, us as patients, are not used to purchasing digital goods in healthcare. So the distribution, the access, even the engagement is actually not straightforward as it would be with a medicine, where you get a prescription, you go to the pharmacy, everything is like you've done it 100 times maybe, or if you haven't done it, you at least know how it works from third-hand experience. The second focus that they have is with healthcare providers, and what they're trying to do with healthcare providers, they're trying to put evidence in their hands. And the reason for this is not because it's a marketing ploy or something like that. It's because doctors in general make informed decisions based on science, and the way of establishing whether someone has clinical merit is with evidence, usually through clinical trials of high quality. And so they're trying to build a body of evidence so that physicians understand what is the benefit to their patients. And this benefit, the product gets incorporated, for instance, in treatment guidelines and pathways. And so ultimately payers feel that because this has become the norm or a norm in a certain segment of population, they're ready to pay for these services. And in order to do that, most payers require outcomes. And then again, Akili is generating outcomes. So we're going to go through a few of these things as explained by Akili and also illustrating, and then we'll move on to Europe. So let's start with these three stakeholders for EndeavorRx, and let's look at what Akili has publicly disclosed they're doing on these things, and then we'll look at how they're doing it from a slightly different angle. So this is from their public filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Every public company needs to do this. With the consumer segment, the first thing that they're doing is they're targeting the parents of the actual patients. The patients are the kids. Obviously, the patients, most of them, or a good chunk of them, are underage. And so parental consent is going to be required. This means the product itself consists not only of the therapeutic intervention, but also of a parental app where they can they need to monitor, or they monitor their kids. How are they trying to make sure that the experience is actually great? Well, they're investing a lot in awareness, as you may imagine, in media. They're also doing acquisition a little bit like you would do in a direct-to-consumer model. So they're trying to get the prescriptions to be completely virtual, and I'll explain how that works in a second. And it's basically you're buying the thing on your own. You're paying out of pocket, yeah? Pretty easy peasy, nothing new here or groundbreaking. For the healthcare providers, as you can see here, the way to disseminate the evidence is building a sales force. They've chosen to build close to 100 FTEs in terms of a sales force for the US. They're trying to cover close to 10,000 physicians, pediatricians, psychologists, psychiatrists, and centers of excellence. And by covering 10,000 specialists, they're just covering about 50%, under 50% of their intended patient population. So less than 50% of patients. This gives you a magnitude of the cost of this go-to-market strategy. The cost of a sales rep, a full-time equivalent rep in the US is above $200,000 per year on a fully allocated basis. And so just, if you do the math, it's a very expensive model to build your own sales force. But EndeavorRx took advantage of the funding that they received when they went public through a SPAC, and they chose to do it this way. Last but not least, with the payers, they need to generate those outcomes that we were saying. And then again, they're trying to, they've allocated specific teams like you would do in a pharmaceutical company. In this case, it's 10 FTEs, And they're following the 80-20 rule. They're focusing on big national plans and Medicaid populations. As a reminder, the price for this, the price tag for this program is $450 times 3 on a monthly basis. So altogether, if you were treated for 3 months, you would pay about $1,200, which is a lot of money. So they need to generate outcomes for this. So how is this? So this is what they disclose. How is it really being rolled out? So from the experience point, I already mentioned that they're trying to get this as seamless as possible. So they've partnered, their CEO has said, you know, we are going to be working on experience first, then we'll move on and work with the HCPs. They've partnered with a company called Phil, which is a digital pharmacy in the US. Most prescriptions in the US for digital therapeutics can be fulfilled in the pharmacy. Now, how it usually works is you get the prescription, you go to the pharmacy gives you a code that you enter in the app, and then the app unlocks and activates. So as I said, this may sound a little bit weird to get an activation code. Not all pharmacies know how to do this. So the solution that Akili has developed is working with Phil, which is a digital pharmacy. So the moment the prescription is made, irrespective of the electronic healthcare record system or physician information system that they're using, whether it's Cerner or Epic or whatever, the electronic prescription can be sent directly to the pharmacy. Check for benefits. So if your insurance covers for the cost of the treatment, it gets approved and the code gets sent directly to the patient. And if it's not and it requires prior authorization, it gets flagged on the healthcare provider's office via Phil, who has integration again with all the physician information systems. So by doing the integration between prescription, electronic healthcare records, and pharmacy, they're able to provide a seamless experience in fulfillment of a prescription. The difficult part in digital therapeutics is not really getting prescriptions, it's actually fulfilling them. And I'll illustrate this in a second. The second thing that they've done here to improve the experience is, remember I said EndeavorRx is a video game. So they've partnered with Roblox. I don't know if you're familiar with Roblox. It's a fairly big community for virtual reality. It works in many different fields, and one of the fields that they're starting to work on is healthcare. So it kind of makes sense that if you're having patients work through games in some kind, in some of these cases is immersive games, that they have Roblox dedicated communities to people that have ADHD, where they can leverage that interaction and convert and start creating leads. On the evidence front, most people, when I discuss digital therapeutics, they're focused on what is the bare minimum that I need. And the bare minimum is usually a pivotal trial where you develop, where you show your evidence against a standard of care or placebo or, different options. But Akili has done a pretty good job. They've gone one step farther and they've done a study as an adjunct to medication. This means if your kid has ADHD and is already taking medication for ADHD, what is the benefit that EndeavorRx is adding? Yeah, so there's additional evidence. They're also doing imaging studies with functional MRI, where they can see what is changing in the brain of kids after they're playing this. So very interesting stuff in terms of building evidence and science. And as you know, regulation changes from country to country, and they're operating in the US only, but they have a Japanese partner, Shionogi, and so they're replicating this even with younger kids in Japan. Last but not least, in a very interesting move, they launched a product registry. This works like a patient registry. It's completely voluntary. It's not compulsory for users, but it gathers a lot of real world evidence, which I'm sure they will leverage then with payers. So this is a little bit of the things that they're doing. Let's look a little bit at this fulfillment issue, and I'm going to do so with this slide here and the next one. And this also illustrates what is the uptake. So for the last almost 2 years, Akili has been in pre-launch phase. So they will launch with physicians Q4 this year. We only have results all the way up to Q2, so it's still kind of early. But remember, they were targeting 10,000 prescribers. They have less than 1,000 prescribers right now. So it's a difficult market. They intend to be a paid digital therapeutic, but the vast majority of users, 93% in Q2, were actually self-paid, which proves the fact that they're doing a great job in awareness. Probably, the amount of prescriptions is growing, even though it's not mind-blowing. Less than 2,000 prescriptions last year. This year they already are matching those numbers at half year, but it's still not blowing up in a population that it's substantially bigger than that. So it's kind of so, and it's self-paid. If you look at the fulfillment issue that I was mentioning earlier with Pear Therapeutics, you can see this on the right hand, where actually only 50% of prescriptions get fulfilled. This means you get a prescription from your physician, and then you go, you really don't know what to do with this, because you're going to get instructions at the doctor's office, download the app, and then process this with your insurer or go to the pharmacy. It's not very intuitive, and that means that a lot of people are just doing exactly what you do with medication sometimes, which is that you get the prescription, but you never get to go around and go to the pharmacy unless you're dying or really feeling sick. And the 50% that you see here on payment rate, it alludes to the fact that a lot of people are getting the prescription, they're getting it fulfilled at the pharmacy, and when they try to claim expense for that prescription, the payers are saying, sorry, this is not covered. And so they need to end up paying out of pocket. In this case, this is also very significant. As you can see here on the left-hand side, the price is $1,300 on average per prescription. And so, it's pretty costly if you need to pay it out of pocket. And still, neither of these two companies are actually making enough revenue at the end of the day, as of this year, 2022, to have breaking even. In fact, they're actually deep in the red and getting deeper and deeper in the red. So they will need to scale up substantially if they want to become profitable. All right, let's switch gears. One last question, one last thing. Pear Therapeutics is also building their own sales force towards physicians. And just as a friendly reminder, way back in 2018, they signed a deal with Sandoz, which is a division of Novartis, you probably know, where they co-promoted their product for addiction, and Novartis pulled out of that deal in 2019. The reason mostly being, there is no official reason, but the reason that is sometimes quoted is that the sales force from Novartis didn't really know how to promote this, and it kind of makes sense. I'll explain this a little bit better with the German example, which I know firsthand. So let's go to the German model, which is slightly different than the US one. It's very German-centric, it's very German, and this is why this slide is in German, but don't worry, I'm gonna walk you through this from left to right. So the arts is the physician, and the physician can do two things. It can provide you with a prescription, which is the upper icon, or a proof of diagnosis. This is important, the proof of diagnosis, because it will affect your go-to-market strategy if you choose to go under a model like DIGA. Once you get that, or the insurer gets that rather, the burden is on the insurer to then handle this prescription with the insurer, the Krankenkasse in German, and then the Krankenkasse, depending on whether that patient actually has a confirmed diagnosis in their electronic healthcare record, will issue an activation code. So you as a patient will receive a prescription. In most cases, very few indications about what to do with this, but you need to contact your insurer. Wait for days or weeks sometimes, then you get an activation code back, which you need then to enter into the app. And only if the code has been entered into the app, then the metadata from the app gets sent to the Krankenkasse, and you as a manufacturer get paid. So the money is always at the very end, yeah? So when you think about how should I go to market in Germany then? So again, a little bit like Achille, you have two options. You can try to do the usual digital model and drive installs like mad, and try to bank on the fact that a lot of people may or may not have a proof of diagnosis or a diagnosis that is firm in their electronic healthcare records, and so they could get an authorization code and then activate. Or you could try to go to your physicians and try to convince them to write a prescription. Now, The prescriptions cannot be fulfilled in the pharmacy like in the US. So the distribution and activation pathway, at least in Germany, it is different. It goes straight into the insurer who needs to authorize that. To make it even more fun, electronic prescription is not available in Germany as of today. So now you are still getting, in most cases, paper prescriptions. Some companies that you will see are scanning their prescriptions. They're asking their patients, take a picture of your prescription and then we'll send it to an insurer for you. This is how much friction this model is suffering from in Germany. And then on top of that, of course, there is the issue that we mentioned about fulfillment, which is still the same. So this is the German model. There is one more thing that is actually quite important. Under DiGA model, DiGA, Germany, is European privacy standards, but Germany has specific standards for DiGAs. The attribution inside the app is actually very, very limited. There is very limited amount of tracking. Mobile marketing partners like Adjust and similar cannot be used under a DiGA model. So that means when you're trying to put together your acquisition tactics or your acquisition funnel on a digital way of thinking about it, you're going to have a break the moment they install the app, because that's the moment that you need to stop using your attribution partners. Yeah, you can do cohort analysis internally, whatever you do, always anonymous, but using partners is not really allowed. So even if you chose to go DTC and spend a ton of money on ads, that will mostly lead to the number of installs, not the actual number of prescriptions or the number of activations. You're never going to be able to decouple those. I said already that there needs to be a confirmed diagnosis. This sometimes is overlooked by a lot of companies. This is an example here for migraine. So if you look at migraine and you can see, okay, how many people have migraine in Germany? If you look at very large studies, telephone surveys or longitudinal surveys of almost 10,000 people, the prevalence of migraine is about 10%. However, if you looked at the number of people who have a migraine diagnosis in their electronic healthcare records, is just 4%. So that means that, that 6% of the whole German population that could potentially get a prescription for your DTx for migraine will not get it until they get a diagnosis. On top of that, you already saw on Achille that they were targeting pediatricians and psychologists and centers of excellence. I think it's also a very good practice when you're thinking about how to go to market in a healthcare professional targeted strategy to see what is your concentration of prescribers. In this case here, for instance, you can very clearly see that most of those diagnoses, the initial diagnosis is made by GPs. And this means that the GP is going to hold the key to most of your volumes. Now, it's very different to target 2,000 neurologists, which is the amount of neurologists that you have in Germany. Maybe 500 are going to be a specialist in migraine, than to target, 20, 30,000 GPs in Germany. Salesforce, very different. So you need to scale up for that too. Also, remember that the DiGA model is a little bit like, it gives you access to a big population, but it has its own rules. I'm not going to dwell a lot into the mechanics of how DiGA works. It works a little bit like drugs. So there is a temporary period or a transitory period where you have free pricing. As you can see here, in most cases, there is a significant discount on price. And the unwritten rule is that most DTx in Germany will fall roughly on the 200 euro mark as the final definitive price for DTx. So whoever says they're going to be able to launch a DTx in Germany at a price of 800 euros, I think that may be true for the first year during the temporary period. It will unlikely be true for the permanent period. Also, a lot of the questions that Luca, you have a question.
Yeah. Can you specify those prices are per program, per month, per quarter? Could you be clear on that, clarify that, please?
Sure. Excellent question. In most DiGAs in Germany are 3-month prescriptions. Yeah, so for 90 days. But to be on the safe side, you would need to go to the BfArM website for DiGAs and you can check it out directly there. Google Translate will do magic for you on that regard. But in most cases, at least I think all cases that are listed here are 3-month prescriptions. Yeah.
Thank you.
The other question that we get a lot is, pricing in pharmaceuticals is usually a function of evidence and cost of the disease, and kind of try to work out that math. And so what needs to be the evidence for DTx is a question that I get very often. You have listed down here in this graph how many trials were used to get permanent listing, and what was the sample size in those trials. So if you think about Somnio, which is the first one, it was one trial with 56 patients. Yes, 56 patients. Yeah, you just need to get it right. It needs to be a randomized controlled trial. It needs to have the adequate statistical power and benefit that will warrant you that kind of approval. Yeah, but when you go to market, I think it's fair to think about a whole year where you're going to have a free price, and you may choose to go as high as Elevida or some others, which have a very high price, and then just factor in the fact that this is going to be low. So during the first year, you may charge very high prices. You need to make sure that you really drive that volume if you want to use that money to fund more activities further down the line. All right, so there is no silver bullet in terms of going to market in Germany. So I've decided to kind of say everything flies in Germany depending on which company. There's one company, Calmeda, which is the #1 in volume of prescriptions and activations. And this is a company that basically is 2 people. And they developed the product with consultants and so on. They took it through regulatory approval. They took it through DIGA approval. And at the moment of going to market, they said, I'm not going to commercialize this. I'm going to have a distributor, which is going to be a partner. And the partner that they have is a company called Paul Boschkamp, which operates in this space. And you can see here a very funky picture. If you go to Paul Boschkamp's website, where you see a lot of OTC things for cold remedies and so on. And you have an app there called Calmeda kind of in the picture. So that is something that some people are doing. Some other people are, so teleconsultation is a service that is also provided by Social Security in Germany. So you can actually call up a teleconsultation service like Teleclinic, have a consultation, have a confirmed diagnosis, get a prescription, and then that gets you started. So a lot of the DIGAs have actually implemented this. Yeah, I'm not going to build a sales force. I'm just going to try to bank on teleconsultation. Well, the problem for this works a little bit like a marketplace. So a lot of the physicians are doing this kind of teleconsultation on the side. They have very few time to do this. So yeah, not really a model that is going to scale up. Companies like Kranos are doing a little bit like what Achille did. They did a lot of noise, a lot of awareness before launch. And when they launched, they were ready. Physicians were aware, all the urologists knew about Kranos. The picture here shows, I think it's seven members of the team that they have. They all have Teslas with the logo, and each one of them were driving around their areas, visiting urologists. So a very good way of getting awareness out there, because you're parking in front of the offices, the hospitals, and so on, and we're thinking, oh, what is Kranos Health, and so on. So it was savvy, and it has been one of the companies that has been taking off fastest. And then other people are trying to do this a little bit more like direct-to-consumer approach, like Vivera, for instance. As you can see here, is asking you to take a picture of your prescription and we'll give you a hand. Now, there is confronting opinions here. There is already one of the Krankenkasse, one of the insurers, that has said this is illegal. This would equate a pharmaceutical company, kind of managing a prescription for a medication. So there is legislation against this. You cannot be a provider or a handler of prescriptions and a manufacturer of the service. So I guess they're taking a little bit of risk there. Some companies are doing it, some aren't. CaraCare, for instance, has the usual survey where you qualify as a patient, and then will increase the chance of you becoming, you getting a prescription, basically, you becoming a patient of theirs. All right, so if you look at the volume, I already mentioned Calmeda right now at the forefront. If you look at half-year figures, is the top one here. So it's not full year, it's half year, bear that in mind. So for 2022, If you extrapolate the 7,000 prescriptions that Calmeda got in the first half, this will probably land somewhere around 15,000 prescriptions, or an annual revenue of about 2.8 million. And similarly, you can see other figures here. So is it something that it's kind of mind-blowing in terms of revenue? Well, maybe not. Compare, the volume of prescriptions that we were seeing with Achilles, for instance, which was in the low thousands, or Pear, which was also in the low thousands. Well, Calmeda, there is 3 players here, which on the first half of 2022 already have more than 7,000 prescriptions. So I would argue that the DIGA model is a very good one if you take the appropriate steps to commercialize in that market. The bottom graph here is the actual cost from one of the Krankenkasse, Techniker Krankenkasse, which is accounts for like 20% of the German population. And you can see there that, because of the price differential, Sanadio was the one that actually was top. But last year, since DIGAs were launched, as you can see for the Krankenkasse, this is like really a small cost. So payers are not really very concerned. I mean, they're pushing it away because they fear this may explode. But then they're not really, this is nothing. Like a couple of million for Techniker Krankenkasse is like nothing, literally. So the reality is that the uptake is slow or uncertain, and that there is no silver bullet in Germany. And I'm going to give the floor back to Jambi now for questions and maybe a chat for the remainder of this call.
Yes, thank you so much, Pablo. That was an absolutely brilliant presentation. I know I have loads of questions, and you sort of opened my mind up to areas that I didn't really consider before. We all talk about it being DTx being amazing, and it is, because it's a new market, it's untapped, but it's also, you have to be realistic about when you're going forward. And I think having that mindset initially, you're able to put sort of things in place in order to stop these barriers that's blocking everybody else, right? So it's good that you've highlighted that. Just before we get onto questions, I know Claudia put one in the group chat. We just want to share something with you, just a little bit about us, who we are, and sort of what we offer. So Luca and Armando, they are the DTx Club founders. This is the Digital Therapeutics Club is their baby. And Janvi is me, and Natasha is our other project manager, and we sort of help run things and hope it goes smoothly. So we are the Digital Therapeutics Club. It's a platform which provides knowledge and content in the DTx space, and we hope to connect the greatest minds in the field with each other. So this is a new and exciting venture, and it creates huge business opportunities when you get it right. We truly believe that this developing market is a goldmine, and we want you to be on this journey with us. So we have talks and activities, workshops and webinars, just like Pablo gave today. And the future hope is to hold dinner clubs with the experts, so we're able to do 2 things that we love: eat and talk. So the foundation of the club stemmed from the desire to connect and learn from the pioneers in the space. So we have created an incredible program for this. We are now running the 4th edition of the DT Excellence program, and this is from November 15th to December 1st. So it is an intensive 3-week online program designed for the highest performing individuals who want to level up and lead in the digital therapeutic space. So the program is as follows. It is what it is. It's 3 weeks, 6 blocks, 2 blocks in each week. In the first block, you'll learn the overview of the digital health ecosystem. Now, this is vital in building the foundation blocks for the rest of the course. You will also be learning how to work in an agile methodology. And this is quite a hot topic at the moment in work field. So in the second block, you'll be learning how to generate value and identify your value proposition through intended use of your device. In the third block, it's all about the delightful experience. So this is understanding the product, but from the patient perspective, and this will inform your product design and architecture. Building block 4, it's all about the data, how you capture it, what you're capturing, what are the outputs, and sort of what technologies do you need to adopt in order to make it successful. In block 5, this will be your guide to understanding the regulatory requirements, sort of clinical validations, and how health economics can be used to inform your research and to present your findings. And finally, block 6, this is a scalable model. So in these modules, you'll learn about the different types of business models and learn how to identify which one is suitable for you. So you will have unlimited access to the course for the whole year. You know, the workshops are conducted by leaders in the DTx space, and we use real cases for our evidence. And you'll also have access to the program sort of private community, and this is where you're able to share ideas, thoughts, and just connect with like-minded people. So this is your roadmap to success in the digital therapeutic space. If you'd like to join or interested in just finding out a little bit more, please reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to have a chat. So thank you for that. But I'm going to now jump back to Pablo, and we can start some of the questions that have been said in the chat. So Claudia has one. She says, why does the pharmacy need to be involved at all? Can the healthcare provider not deliver the code? I think this is talking about when you were saying the integration between the prescription, the healthcare providers, and the pharmacy.
Yeah, so actually this goes back to the digital therapeutics definition, which qualifies all digital therapeutics as a medical device. And so as a medical product, the distribution of medical products cannot be in the hands of physicians in most cases. So it's actually, I mean, if you're on an inpatient situation, so you're in hospital, the hospital will provide that for you. But if you're on an outpatient basis, which is the case of DIGA. DIGA is an outpatient setting, for instance. Pharmacy needs to be involved in the US because it's a medical device. So it is hand in hand with the definition. So to make an analogy here, can you buy a thermometer on a supermarket? No, you cannot. Why? Because a thermometer is a medical device. It's a very low risk, the lowest risk medical device, but it is a medical device. So it's the same logic applies. It's not specific to DTx, it's just healthcare product legislation.
Yeah, really interesting you say that. Also, Pablo, so there's quite a lot of DTxs on the market at the moment that sort of focus solely on one condition, which is really good, but you don't really see this integration between sort of they're all working in silos, right? It's this idea of if you have your prescription and you have a connection with the pharmacy and the healthcare provider and even insurance on top of that, it's like a whole system that can be built and support each other. So if sort of one area falls, something else can sort of back it up. And it's this idea that you really tapped into. If everything was integrated and if it was an interoperable process, it would be more successful than sort of the companies that fail at the moment.
Absolutely. And I think by design, the DIGA model has built some interoperable capabilities on it. So the fact that you cannot become a DIGA unless you have the capacity to export your patient data in an interoperable format called FEAR or HL7. So that by design is available. The issue here, it's not really on the provider, so on the DTx manufacturer side, I think it's more on the healthcare provider side. You need to understand that most healthcare or doctor information systems are actually pretty big. You need to think about it as like subsystems. They're very big systems that get customized depending on which ward you're practicing, which hospital you're sitting on. They have all common elements like ICD-10 diagnosis codes and procedural codes and so on. But there is a fair amount of customization in these systems, which sometimes makes it hard to make things interoperable. I've worked in integrating, some of these systems into very big systems like Jefferson in the US and UCLA. And these are month-long projects where you really need to do a mapping of the data that you're going to be providing, map it out on the healthcare provider vendor. And then, as you can imagine, Epic or Cerner are not willing to open up their systems very easily, or the hospital administrators. Yeah, so there's still room for improvement. There is adaptators that you can use. There's a few solutions there, but there's still a way to go there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you, Pablo. That was really insightful. So Ingrid has a question. Is it allowed to promote digital therapeutics directly to patients? In case it would be reimbursed by the Spanish Social Security, in case of the reimbursed drugs, it is not allowed.
So the last remark is actually correct. Prescription pharmaceuticals are not allowed to be promoted to patients. However, non-prescription pharmaceuticals are allowed. The proof is that you can see, ads on TV of OTC drugs. Now, prescription pharmaceuticals can also be promoted to patients directly in the US. So if you visit the US, you will on TV see prescription drugs ads on TV, for instance. Now, again, going back to the definition of a digital therapeutic, because it's a medical device, medical devices are allowed to be promoted to patients directly in Europe. And in the US, of course.
Mm-hmm. So then
so the second part was about reimbursement, Jambi?
Yeah. In case it would be reimbursed by the Spanish Social Security. So if it was reimbursed, correct me if I'm wrong, Ingrid, but if it was reimbursed, then would you be allowed to promote it to patients?
I'm not a legal expert here, but I would say they are independent things. You can have ibuprofen, which you can buy without a prescription as part of a medicine that could be prescribed under Social Security, and it is indeed reimbursed, and you can still see ads. So I think the answer would be yes in Spain. A whole different question is whether Spain is ready to adopt digital therapeutics, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's interesting that you say that if you can't sort of prescribe, it's like, there's this whole other aspect that we need to sort of consider. If you can't even promote it to your patients without it being approved or without the proper people promoting it and getting it out there, how is it meant to spread? How is the word meant to spread? I think it is this case of, it's an unregulated market in some areas. It's very new. So there's a lot of scope for what could go wrong, but also what could go right. And it's about sort of identifying and having someone in place to make those measures.
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question. I do not fundamentally agree with the notion that you cannot promote your product. You may need to turn off some of the features, specifically the ones that make them a medical device. And this is something that a lot of these companies and companies that have operated in the past have done. So if you don't want to manage, treat, diagnose any condition, you may choose just to monitor the condition, and that doesn't mean that you're going to be a medical device if you craft it purposely. And so you may start as a monitor and then do a big push in awareness. You may still promote your company. A lot of when you go to market with pharmaceuticals, and I think this is true for any healthcare product really, you need to a fair amount of market preparation, which means that you need to talk to a lot of doctors, present the evidence, and so on. I think a lot of the debate here is around promoting direct to patients. My personal experience is that promoting directly to patients with digital therapeutics may not be the best idea. Mm-hmm. Because well, at least in Europe, there is no willingness to pay. If I had to go around the people that are here on the call and ask you, how many of you would pay, let's say, $10 a month for a completely digital program? Be honest with you, think about how much thought you put behind subscribing to Netflix or Spotify, and how many times you consider, well, am I really using Netflix or not? And the same argument is actually true if you're pondering whether you're gonna subscribe or mm-hmm. download a health app. And that's $10. Imagine if it was $450, like Akili Health, Endeavor RX, or a couple hundred like the German DTx. Mm-hmm. Would you still do it? Be honest with you, raise your hand if you think you really would do it. And so really what I'm talking about here is willingness to pay. Is there really patients' willingness to pay for a digital therapeutic as of today? And if there isn't, then the business model needs to accommodate for that and not place the burden of payment onto the patient. Place it somewhere else.
No, for sure. And that's when, that's when sort of the innovative ideas could come out, and it could just, if you were able to have a device that you paid on subscription for, but essentially it paid you back in the way that if it was working for you, it could be reimbursed essentially from the provider, it'd be great. Okay, but anyway, sorry, I could go on for that for ages. Abhishek has a question. He says, what strategy can pharma take for ensuring adoption, download and retention for a companion app? Any success stories?
So first of all, a companion app is not a digital therapeutic, but still I'm going to take the question. Yes, there are a lot of success cases. I would say in most cases, it entails co-creating with who your main stakeholder is. So pharma's main stakeholder, regardless of what they say, in most cases are not the patients, they're the physicians, because their sales force is geared towards physicians. Most 90% of their activities are geared towards physicians, not towards patients. As a result, a lot of the programs that come out of pharma are physician driven and not patient driven, and that creates poor engagement. In those cases where there has been co-creation between patients and physicians, the engagement rates have been notoriously higher. So that's my 2 cents. I think it's a super broad topic, and it's very difficult to make a blanket statement about this or to select specific cases. But suffice to say that there is there's a few good publications already that look into engagement and digitalization. And there is one particular study in Belgium done that correlates the amount of engagement with the controllability. So controllability means, is what I'm doing from a digital perspective having an impact on my condition? And so you can ponder this. The highest engagement rates are usually seen in things like diabetes. Why? Because if you're using a continuous glucose meter and you're using digital health, you can calculate your insulin bolus for the next dose. So whatever I'm doing to measure, it gets you get actionable results in a matter of minutes. And so people keep on being engaged. On the other side, you consider cancer, where really I'm having cancer. So really, what is this going to do for me? It's not going to cure cancer. The engagement rates are substantially lower. Yeah, and so you may drive that, and it basically correlates with what are the patient's belief in trying to control their disease through digital means. Anyway, opening a door there for discussion.
No, that's brilliant. And Abhishek said thank you as well on the chat. So we have a question from Victoria. She says, why do you think these products are not more successful in the market? Are there any, it's either human to human or hospital to home data versus any drug, for example, in the mental health stream? How the physicians perceive these therapies. So let's start off with, why do you think these aren't as successful? Victoria, please jump in as well.
Yes, hola, Pablo. I don't know if you can hear me or see me. Yes, I was actually meant to have to question if there are any data, head-to-head data, comparing these digital therapeutics with drugs. Because I guess that's the main challenge here is convincing physicians that your evidence is as good or as robust as the one you get with a drug, or even payers that you know very well that, especially in the German market, in America, it's not yet like that, but it will be. At the end of the day, you have to demonstrate that you are able to save money to the system, that you're able to, so what is the perception of these digital therapeutics? And I was asking that maybe mental health is an area which I think, I'm not an expert again, but I think that maybe digital therapeutics have a big opportunity. And I was wondering if there are any data actually comparing what you can get with one of these apps versus what you can get with a pill or a drug.
Yeah, it's a very good question. The short answer is not that I'm aware of. In the Victoria and I have known each other for a long time, and I know the definition that you have of head-to-head in your head, in your mind, and that's not, as far as I know, no, there is no head-to-head studies yet. However, let me throw a couple of things more. If you think of the study that I mentioned from Achille, it's not head-to-head as in a comparison, but rather as an adjunct. And that's something that, as you know, you do very often with pharmaceuticals too, with medicines, where instead of trying to go to head-to-head with the gold standard, you try to position yourself as an adjunct therapy or second-line therapy, etc. So I think the trend is that digital therapeutics will try to slowly but steadily try to position themselves as adjunct to medication, because they do add value. Now, whether the value merits having its own place in therapy, I think it's too early to say, and evidence like the one that you're suggesting will be required. Also remember that there is a couple companies that are working on digital therapeutics plus medicine combination. Click Therapeutics with Otsuka and Boehringer Ingelheim for schizophrenia and major depressive disorder, both of them in that psychiatry, mental health kind of spectrum. And they're doing super smart development programs where they have 4-arm trials where you have the digital therapeutics, the medicine, the combination of both, and placebo. And I think those studies will help us inform a little bit, for instance, what is the benefit that a digital therapeutic has on a standalone, on a normalized population compared to placebo and to an active control. So ideally, you know, I don't know of any of those studies. They haven't been made public, the results, but hopefully in the future.
Perfect. Thank you, Pablo.
Sure.
That's great. Thank you, Pablo. So those were all the, oh no, we have a, yeah, Cami, go for it.
Yeah, so as you was saying that, Pablo, just something just came to my mind that it looks to me that the first sort of point of attack for digital therapeutic is so those that have high prevalence and highly diagnosed in the market. Have you seen any that goes into the direction of unmet need that they could sort of settle themselves as standard of care instead of being, you know, second line or third line as an adjunct to the standard of care of those widely diagnosed diseases or conditions?
Wow, that's a challenging question. Thank you. Nothing pops to mind right now. I'm going to challenge the notion. If I conveyed the idea that it's only high prevalence diseases, the ones that will probably work for digital therapeutics, I want to scratch that and say otherwise. And let me tell you why. I mean, we're talking about go-to-market strategies, and I've focused on companies that have chosen to go to market on their own with the sole example. I mean, I did highlight that Pear had that alliance with Sandoz and that Paul Boschkam and Calmeda worked together. But, you know, we haven't seen really a development powerhouse that out-licenses digital therapeutics to distributors or partners. We haven't seen that. And in biotechnology, you see this all the time, where people develop digital therapeutics up to a point where they have added value, they have gathered evidence, they have gone through the basic regulatory hurdles, but then they choose not to go through the very expensive distribution and marketing models that you see with healthcare providers. And I think that's something that in the future we will see. Once that gets out of the way, then yes, I think a lot of orphan diseases, a lot of diseases that usually are neglected by pharmaceuticals may be catered by digital therapeutics. Why? Because the development cost of a digital therapeutic is 2 to 2.5 million. The similar cost for a drug is going to be 10 times or 100 times that, if you're lucky. And but then we'll need the kind of evidence that Victoria was pointing at. Yeah, so you will need to have very solid evidence that this is really providing outcomes. But then again, this is built on the digital therapeutics definition. So, so I think there's a reason to be hopeful. Is my answer. No, I cannot give you an example of that because as far as I know, no, it doesn't exist such model. But I think there is reasons for hope.
Thank you. I can't think of any either. That's why I asked. And because, well, I mean, if someone wants to go to that direction, then how do they approach that exactly? Because it's very costly, right? I mean, I come from a pharmaceutical background, so I know how much it costs to do all this go-to-market strategy, all this trial that costs up to billions, depending on how many patients that you want to involve. And that's probably one of the reasons why a lot of companies do not do so many trials, because the payoff might not be as much. But for orphan drug diseases, they usually have sort of the special one with the FDA, for example, for development pathway. But the go-to-market part, I think, is always a tricky part.
different hurdles. Both of them are talented, but different hurdles. I agree with you. It is expensive if you're choosing to market yourself. I mean, my key message here would be that it is feasible to market digital therapeutics, but you're going to need deep pockets. And what I would encourage you, if you're thinking about marketing digital therapeutics, is to consider and going through distributors or partnerships to kind of de-risk that go-to-market. It's not unthinkable. A lot of medtech companies that market medical devices are actually more and more interested on digital therapeutics because their devices are becoming increasingly more connected. So I think the pathway here was paved again by glucose meters plus pens that auto injectors that are controlled by apps. Yeah. So at the core, you have the app who reads the glucometer and kind of tailors the dose of insulin that you're going to get. If you think for one of those indications that you're mentioning, if you have a device company that is operating in that specific indication that you have in mind, that may be a very good partner, a much better partner than a pharma company in that space.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you, Cami and Pablo. Very, very insightful conversation. Does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to ask? Shout out. No? Okay, well then I think we will end on that note. Pablo, thank you so much. Honestly, a great conversation, and you've given us food for thought for the future. Absolutely incredible. So thank you. If anybody else wants to reach out to him, please, it's Pablo Prieto on LinkedIn. And I'm sure he'd be more than happy to have a conversation. And if you want to join the program as well, or just learn more about it, please reach out to me, Luca, or Armando as well. But thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you, Jambi.
Thank you for
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Jambi.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Pablo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.